small parts very leisurely at this stage, at this rate. It's going to take us very long to cover the whole book. But the reason why I was taking my time is to accustom you to the mode of Sri Aurobindo's narration, the kind of poetry that you have to encounter here. This has proved very difficult for great scholars. And many scholars believe that this is not poetry at all. So in India, they are waiting for either Oxford or Cambridge to start studying this, then they will take it up. So they by themselves do not yet have the confidence. There are all kinds of problems. One problem is, generally it is believed by Western scholars that epic generally is written during the infancy of a civilization. Now human civilization is at least 2,000 to 3,000 years old, so it is too late for an epic to appear. And therefore they prefer that in this age people write small lyrics, maybe 2, 3 pages, 4 pages, mainly talking about life's frustrations, talking about the anguish that life has become. And here is a joyous celebration of life. Sri Aurobindo celebrates life, Sri Aurobindo celebrates God's creation, almost in every word. And so they believe that this can't really be true, this can't really be great poetry. Such poetry, if at all it is written, it can only come during the infancy, like the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and the great Greek epics and the great Latin epics, they all came very early in our cycle of civilization. Now we are almost approaching the senility of our civilization. It's very, and so how can you ever write epics? Now this argument, which takes many people, which many people accept, has a great flaw in it. And that flaw is, it is true we are now approaching the end of a cycle, almost the fading years of what Sri Aurobindo calls the mental age. And mind came and has done wonders for us. And Sri Aurobindo is second to none in paying his respects, in showing his admiration, adoration for the great work that mind has done. The mind that has enabled us to go to the moon, that enabled us to harness all the power that nature has, and as I said the other day, that has made each one of us more powerful than the greatest Mughal emperor Akbar. That's what science has done. This is not restricted to a few people. You and I today have the privilege of just standing up, switching on a button, and the air conditioner comes on, or taking up a telephone and talking to your people in New York or wherever you want, something that Akbar wouldn't even have found it easy to believe. He had to depend on crude means like sending somebody on horseback if he wanted to send a message from Delhi to Agra, and that would take a whole day's journey. Here you are, and we are doing these wonders. And Sri Aurobindo notes at every stage that mind has done wonders for us. But mind is not the ultimate station, it's not the halting station. It is only one station on our continuing journey, on the evolutionary journey. And so, we are in one sense reaching the end of the mental age and are gradually moving on to another cycle of civilization, where intuition, where the spirit, where this age of subjectivity is coming. Mental age is in a age of objectivity. We try to be objective. Science tries to be objective. That is its great strength. Now, there is a new subjectivity is coming. And more people are open to the truth that goes beyond the mind, that the mind by itself cannot comprehend. And the new subjective age is coming. And so in one sense, just as we can describe this age as the last fading years of an earlier age, of the mental age, this is the infancy of the subjective age. Now, if this is the infancy of a subjective age, then this is also the time for a great epic which primarily talks about man's inner journey. We were talking about Ashwapati's yoga, which Aurobindo describes over a stretch of 12,000 lines, the equivalent of it in Vyasa's Mahabharata story. Ashwapati's yajna is described in 10 lines. With 12,000 lines, what is it about? It is about Ashwapati's exploration of the inner world. Now, who else can describe this than somebody like Aurobindo, who spent at least 50 years of his life doing this journey, particularly in Pondicherry when he was there for 40 years. He had one primary preoccupation. His preoccupation was not writing books. His preoccupation was not writing Savitri. His preoccupation was not creating the ashram. His preoccupation was not guiding his disciples. His primary preoccupation, as I was saying, that he sensed that man's evolutionary journey has now stopped because we have reached the highest limit of the mind and we don't know how to go beyond it. Is there a beyond? The first thing he had to ask, is there a beyond? In which direction does this beyond lie? And how do we go to the beyond? And if we went to the beyond, is this going to be a siddhi of a rare individual? See, there are various kinds of siddhis. I'll give you an example. It is believed the greatest musician of Akbar's court, Tansing, when he sang one of the ragas, Deepak Rag for example, certainly all the lights come on. Without anybody lighting any lamp, all lamps would be lit because the power of his music. Now this is a great siddhi. Now how many people can achieve such a siddhi? Suppose Aurobindo achieves a siddhi which is so rare that only another Aurobindo can achieve it. Another Tansen can achieve this siddhi. That siddhi is absolutely useless for you and me. We want a siddhi which is a siddhi that Edison has given us. A siddhi like the electric bulb which anybody can use. It can be in the bathroom, it can be in the drawing room, it can be wherever light is required, and it doesn't require an exceptionally talented, exceptionally gifted person. This is the kind of siddhi that Aurobindo wanted. And so his entire 40 years in Pondicherry was not only to find out where do we go beyond the mind, how do we go there, not only just how do I go there, but how does humanity go there. And humanity doesn't consist of all Aurobindo's. Humanity consists of monkeys like you and me, half monkeys, half human beings. And it should be possible for us to go there. So this is what he was trying to do for all the 40 years he was in Pondicherry. And therefore, his one single preoccupation was man's inner life, man's inner journey. And it took him 40 years, as I said. Even before that, he had already started on this journey. And therefore, this epic is an epic of the journey of man in the interior of his being. All the other odysseys, Ramayana and Mahabharata, they're all journeys describing the external geographical dimensions. Ashwapati went, where did he go? What kind of journey did he undertake? He just sat down and looked within, and there are infinite worlds, as you will see very soon. He goes to infinite worlds. All these worlds are there as a part of his interior landscape, as a part of his spiritual landscape. And so if you look at all that, this is an epic where, as I just now said, 22 cantos are devoted to the description of Aurobindo's own yoga. 7 cantos are devoted to the description of the mother's yoga. 22 plus 7 is 29. And out of about 48 cantos, 29 cantos are devoted to the yoga alone. So this is primarily an epic which can only come at the beginning of a new age. So there is undoubtedly, there should be no reason to doubt that an epic like this has appeared. It heralds the coming of a new age, the subjective age, the spiritual age. The spiritual age will not necessarily come in the way we in India think it will come. God doesn't seem to have any special fascination for Indians. Whatever, if God exists, the new age coming, it will come all over the world, and it will also come in non-religious ways. This is a world, this is a new spirit, this is a new age in which the Americans, the Africans, the Indians, everybody has to participate, everybody has to grow into it. So this is this kind of an age that Aurobindo is talking about, and therefore it is wrong to say that this epic has come at a wrong time. This is not only the infancy, the senility of a mental age, it is also the infancy of the spiritual age. And if epics come during the infancy of a civilization, this is the right time for an epic like Savitri to appear. And so, the emphasis here, as you can see, is Ashwapati's yoga, Savitri's yoga, the inner journey. And as I pointed out, Ashwapati's yoga is in 3 parts. And what are these 3 parts? Aurobindo himself in a letter on page 778 describes this. He says, Ashwapati's yoga falls into 3 parts. He says they falls into 3 parts. First, he is achieving his own spiritual self-fulfillment as the individual, and this is described as the yoga of the king. This is described in cantos 4 and 5 of book 1. His individual psycho-spiritual transformation. So before you can even save the world, the Indian wisdom says, first save yourself. You can't save the world if you have not saved yourself. In fact, the problem with the world is a large number of quacks are going around trying to save the world. Before they go around and try to save the world, they must first of all try to understand what the world is, what is the problem the world is suffering from. Take for example, people say, oh, this spiritual enterprise is a very selfish enterprise, don't you know? Particularly in India, there is this kind of leftist slogan. Don't you know there are problems of roti, kapda and makan? There are very hungry people, there are people without homes, there are people without education, and you have forgotten all these people and you sit for a meditation, you sit for a spiritual pursuit and so on. Isn't it selfish? The answer simply is, those who do this are a very small minority. The majority is busy fighting elections, running governments and so on, and last 50 years you have been busy with this. What have you achieved? Have you solved any one of these problems? Since the beginning of human history, have these problems been solved? Why not? Why have they not been solved? Because although the problems may look simple, the solutions are not simple. The limitations on human happiness are not external. The limitations on human happiness are internal limitations. They are limitations of your consciousness. Until man's consciousness changes, man's problem will not be solved. In India, we have one kind of manifestation of these problems, which is material poverty, material deprivation, all kinds of things. In the West, where they have solved the material problem, they have another kind of problem. They have a problem dealing with human relationship. They have a problem dealing with demands. Where do we go now? That is the quest Westerners are asking. Oh, I have exhausted Wales and Scotland, and I have gone here, there. I have roamed all over the world. Where do I go now? There are no places for me to go. I have even gone to the moon. Where do I go? What do I do with my life? That's the question. They don't know where to go. So wherever you go and see, it is not the external things, it is the internal things. And therefore the spiritual man says, first of all, before you can understand what the problem is from which the world is suffering, you must first of all try to disengage yourselves from the treacherous hold of the human ego. The human ego, if I look at the world problem, I can only look at it as an Indian. I can only look at it as an academic. I can look at it only as a Brahmin. I can look at it only as a professor of English linguistics. These are all the limitations of my personality. I can't get out of it. If you look at a newspaper and observe very carefully how you react to each issue, you will realize how your understanding of the world is closely bound to the grid framed over your personality. Why should it be the case that when the test match takes place and Pakistan wins and India loses, why should the morning cup of tea, why should it taste insipid? After all, it's a game. The better team won. Why is it that we would like every time to win? Of course, we never win. That's a different matter. I'm giving you a small example. Everywhere, we don't really know. I am myself amazed at the way my egoistic personality completely colors my perception of the world. And so, before you can understand the world, before you can suggest solution to the world's problems, you must rise from the total hold of your ego. And so, first of all, in India, the tradition says, first free yourself so that you can see what the problem is. Once you know what the problem is, then you can find solutions to it. We are all like quack doctors. We have one injection for all maladies. We don't ask before giving injection whether he is suffering from the disease. I simply say, I have the only injection I have is this. You must have the problems. I am anxious to give you the injection. And so all these harebrained schemes that we have, they all fail, Mother says somewhere that when she was in Japan, she met Tolstoy's son, the great Count Leo Tolstoy, the writer of War and Peace, the writer of Anna Karenina and so on, son of a great father. He had one ambition, burning ambition in life. What is it? Humanity should be one. Human unity. Wonderful, noble ideal. Who says it's not a noble ideal? It's one of the ideals which Aurobindo has put before us. But he said, the means for it, how do we make humanity one? He says very simple. What is it? All men should dress alike and all women should dress alike. If a uniform is followed in dress code, whether you are an Eskimo or Indian or Pakistani, if all men dress alike and all women dress alike, he was absolutely sure the world is going to be one. Our answers are of this kind, because they are not based on a real understanding of the situation, real understanding the problem. And that is why we always emphasize, before you can help others, before you can really render help to other people, you have to be free from the stranglehold of the ego. And that is the first step in Ashwapati's yoga. Now, this is, last 2-3 days I have read out various passages, and my focus of interest was to give you an idea what Aurobindo really means by spirituality. The word spiritual is greatly misunderstood among Indians as well as among non-Indians, just like the word yoga. In India, every fashionable woman does yoga these days. You become yoga. What does the yoga mean? Yoga means so that your weight is reduced, your body remains slim. That's not the whole purpose of yoga. That's not the idea of yoga. That's only one part of yoga. In Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, asana is one of the 8 steps. When you take all the 8 steps, then you become a yogi. So just as yoga, or take the word guru. The word guru, whenever it is used in English, it has always some pejorative sense. It doesn't have the sense that we have, where Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshwara, where Guru is supposed to be the equivalent of the Lord, even greater than the Lord. That's the association we have with the word Guru. But when it comes to English, similarly, spirituality is generally mistaken for singing bhajans. I am not saying singing bhajans is not spirituality. I don't want to go into it. I have explained this at some length 2 days. There are many, many things, many, many practices, but the focus of spirituality is realization that you are a spirit. You are not your body, you are not your mind, you are not the personality that you have so laboriously formed, and you become a doctor or a lawyer or a solicitor or whatever, and people recognize you, and so that's not your real being. Your real being is the spirit, and this spirit is a spark of God, and your life is meant to be handed over to the real representative God that is seated in you, and all that you have is an instrument that the spirit has to use, and then you live this life as an instrument of the divine. Your will becomes one with his will. This is a glorious thing which can happen to you once you decide to bring to the front what may be called the psychic being or the soul or whatever you call. That is the purpose, that is spirituality. Reading the Upanishads, reading the Bhagavad Gita, reading this book, that book, singing bhajans, they are all aids. They are not the real thing. Eating health foods is good, but there is no guarantee. If you don't do other things, you necessarily become healthy just because you eat health foods. There was a time when I was eating only health foods, and doctor said, you are doing something wrong. What is it? You are eating too much of it. Things can happen like that, you see. There has to be a balance. Spirituality is this. And a spiritual man, therefore, doesn't have to do any of the things. He can still be spiritual. Aurobindo talks about this. Remember? He says, do not try to understand your life by looking only at the surface events. The real thing in you is the inner growth of your being. And that decides whether in your external life you will have triumph or failure, success or defeat, death or life. All these things are determined by the inner being. And the mother has gone even to the extent that when you die, when I die, it is primarily a decision taken by my soul. If you ask the mind doesn't want to die. Mind has invested so much in this body, in the relationships, in everything. Oh, I would like to continue a little longer. It's the soul which says, I had taken this body in these circumstances for a certain kind of experience. Now that job is finished. Let me move on. And then she even says, before you die, you even decide what kind of a life you want to come back to. Whether you want to come back in Timbuktu, or you want to come back in Banaras, or you want to be a Swiss or Swedish or whatever. You see, if you are asked, you will say, I would like to be born a Singaporean where the standard of life is very high, or you would like to be somebody from Switzerland where they have made great progress at the cost of the Jews and the money they invested in Swedish banks. This is what human mind is. Human mind always likes these things. It's quite possible in this life you are Prince of Wales, who is waiting indefinitely to occupy the woman. And then next life you may be a gardener somewhere else. In our materialistic calculation, being Prince Charles is a great thing, but for a soul there is no difference, because that's also a life. That also can be used to garner experience for the soul's growth. This is what it is, and therefore the inner being, and inner being should be our one concern. Its growth should be the real concern. That is spiritual life. Everything else is ancillary to it, to the extent it brings it forward. And what kinds of things bring it forward? Giving, loving, compassion, taking, grabbing, jealousy. Every time you allow yourself to be dominated by any one of these, you are creating between your soul and yourself an iron curtain. It is up to us. Every time there is an act of giving yourself, act of love, act of compassion, then this curtain is loosened, curtain becomes thin, and your soul comes more and more to the front. So, spirituality is these things. Spirituality does not even require that you go to a temple. Spirituality does not, I'm not saying you must not go to the temple. What I'm saying is it is not essential. Each person has to devise what program suits him. And this is what we saw in the first part of this when we talked about Ashwapati's own yoga. Now, one of the things that can happen to you as a result of your yoga, as I said, is your perception of life's problems changes. And I very often relate this to Sri Aurobindo's own life. When Aurobindo started yoga, his one ambition was to gather as much power as he could from yoga so that he could use it for the emancipation of the country, for the upliftment of the country, to bring it greater glory. Then he realized that there is nothing like an exclusively Indian problem. The problem is man's problem. The problem is problem of man's consciousness. And what is the problem? Man has now come to the end of his growth as a mental being. And the achievements are wonderful. There is no doubt about it. Sri Aurobindo has paid the greatest of compliment you can imagine to materialism. There is an essay of it by his called Materialism. And he says this is the wonderful thing that could happen to man. But then, after all the good things that materialism has done, you can't forever rest in materialism. You have to move on. You have to go beyond it. So, he now, Ashwapati now realizes, as a result of his yoga, that this world that you see around us is God growing back towards his fullest manifestation. And as I said, God took a plunge, and the plunge into the inconscient. And that is why from the inconscient, slowly higher and higher facets of consciousness emerge. Matter comes. From energy came matter, and from matter came life. From life came mind. From mind are going to emerge higher and higher levels of consciousness. Ultimately, God is going to emerge. Why? Because God has taken a plunge into matter, and God has to come up. There is no choice. You and I are not given a choice. Shall God come up or not? Nobody is going to ask us, because all this has become possible because what Sri Aurobindo calls involution. God has already gone into matter, inconscient, and is gradually manifesting himself. Now, in this journey, as we said, we have come up to the level of the mind. Now, where do we go from here? You see, all the yogis of the earlier age, they stood at the peak of their mental consciousness and looked beyond. And when they looked beyond, they saw a world of perfection, a Kailas, a Vaikuntha, some world of perfection. And they all said, we would like that world of perfection to come down here on earth. Then they suddenly realized, between that world of perfection and the highest level of consciousness to which man can reach, there is a gap. Now, how can you bring that world down across this gap? It's not possible. They also realized, therefore, that if we want to go to that world, since there is no bridge, we can only reach that world after death. So when do you get your Vaikuntha? When do you get your Kailas? When do you get to all this world of perfection? After death. And therefore, generally the tendency has been, there is a world of perfection. That world of perfection cannot be brought down to this earth. This earth, therefore, cannot be improved, corrected. Perfection cannot be brought to this earth. The best thing, therefore, is when you are sufficiently disgusted with this world, call it a day. Take the nearest, the best available ticket to Hardwar or Rishikesh, go there and sit down, close your eyes and look within yourself. Lo and behold, maybe after 6 years, 10 years, 15 years, you will have the kingdom of God. But what about all the garbage and all the dirt and all the imperfection of the world? Oh, don't worry about it. The world will always remain like this. This is what religions have always been saying. But when Sri Aurobindo went there and he saw this is what the religions had concluded, he said, God can't be a joker. God creates this world, invests so much creativity, and creates somebody like man with a brain that he has, which is the most complex organism in the entire galaxy. There is nothing more complex than the brain. And after creating all these things, he has created all these things. Why? So that you and I become disgusted with this world. And therefore all these lectures, oh, the world is a maya, the world is a mithya, don't look at the world, don't get married. If you are caught at the age of 16 or 17, the better. So all that we are interested in frustrating God's effort at creating this world a perfect place. And trying to frustrate God's attempt, we call it religion. And the more you condemn life, the greater the Baba or Mahant becomes. Oh, he's condemning life. Some Mahants don't even look at women. Some Mahants don't touch money. Now, who created women? Who created money? And the same attitude. Christ is the only avatar. Why? Because Christ was born out of immaculate conception. Somebody who is not born of immaculate conception, who is born the way you and I born through a sexual act, must be sinful. Why would God do this? Why would God create only one way of making human babies? And that is through sex, if it is all sinful. So all these, our mental confusion we have put on God and say God decided all this is sin. There is only one thing which is not a sin. What is it? Leaving the world, running away as fast. Palayanam is the only. This has been our entire tradition. And Aurobindo, when he looked at this, he realized that there must be a way out. And he then realized that when you stand at the topmost level of your mental consciousness and look at the world of perfection, you see a gap, don't you? He says, this gap can be bridged. How do you bridge this? And for that, he says, we must gratefully remember our ancestors. They have given us the most powerful tool called yoga. He says somewhere that modern science harvested all this rich world of discoveries and inventions because the induction and deduction as two methods were known to scientists. But in the 21st century, the world will realize the greatest gift mankind our history has given us is not induction and deduction, but yoga. Yoga is a way by which you get hold of your consciousness, purify it, universalize it, widen it so that it becomes the most powerful instrument you have. It is not true that mind is the most powerful instrument you have. Mind is only an expression of something greater than that. What is the greatest thing in this world? Consciousness, your consciousness. And he felt that if we prepared our consciousness properly and if we continued along this journey, this gap can be bridged, and this bridge Aurobindo calls the supermind. Supermind is the bridge, and once you build this bridge, this is the golden bridge that connects the mind to the world of perfection. Then two things can happen. One is you go up to that level of the perfect world and bring it down with you so that the earth is changed. Whoever tries to change the world only on the basis of the powers of the human mind is bound to fail. Karl Marx discovered this. He wanted to bring a paradise here on earth. On what basis? On the basis of the mind. And history has shown this is not possible. See, all the avatars and all the great prophets and all these people have failed. We all sing Hindu, Muslim, bhai, bhai, Hindu, Chini, bhai, bhai, this is bhai and that bhai. But there come great shocks in human life when your entire being is shaken and you forget everything. You run to the kitchen. If a sword is not available, you take hold of a knife and use that against your neighbor. What happened to all this bhai, bhai? What happened to all this moral armament? Lebanon, where Khalil Gibran was born, around which Christ walked. For several years, neighbors became enemies. At one time, Lebanon was a paradigm example of universal harmony. Nobody ever asked, if you went to a cafe in Lebanon, nobody asked whether you're a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian, you're Eastern or Western, there was such harmony. Suddenly the whole thing broke. The same thing happened. Gandhi wanted to build Hindu-Muslim unity. Even Hindus and Sikhs couldn't live together for some time. So all your moral preachings, all your moral teachings, education, you know, the best education is a German education. Even if you go to the United States and look at the university curriculum and program, they have all borrowed practices from the German. And undoubtedly Germany is the best educated nation in the world, or at least it was until the 1930s and 40s. But what is the use? They were the ones who started the Second World War. They were the ones who did all those atrocities against Jews. How can educated people do all these things? Is education an ultimate solution to any of these problems? The more educated, I always say in India, if you are not educated, you will remain a village gunda in Karamsad or Vallabh or somewhere. If you get educated, you become a politician, go to Delhi. The same mentality is the same. Education gives you the means, it doesn't give you the culture. And so Germans were greatly highly educated, but a madman like Hitler came. You must have seen movies like Schindler's List, where such atrocities committed. A mother has 5 children, and they have decided to finish off all these children, but one at a time. The mother is given the choice. Out of these 5 children, which child should be killed today? You tell me. Can you just imagine human beings doing these things to other people? And all this was done by Germans, the most highly educated country. Even today, the greatest Sanskrit scholarship, after some parts in India, you find in Germany. The greatest admirers of Indian tradition are still in Germany. So essentially I am not saying they are bad people, but what I am saying is education is no guarantee that these things will be solved. Morality is no guarantee. We have Mother Teresa. Must have heard of Mother Teresa. Our government of India requires some representatives, he wants to reward. So any reward government of India thinks of, first reward is given to Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa is undoubtedly doing wonderful work. Okay. Philanthropy, when people fall ill, when people are dying, she gives them shelter so that they are in a position to die in peace. Okay. Now, is this the solution to man's problems? We are very impressed. The educated man in India doesn't look far enough. He is tremendously impressed. In India, everybody has nothing but the highest regard for Mother Teresa. And even people who blame Indian spirituality, they have regard for Mother Teresa. As if Mother Teresa is the answer to all problems. Personally, if Mother Teresa comes before me, I will touch her feet and do pranams to her. But is this the solution to human problems? Take for example, how many Mother Teresas are we going to need? Calcutta certainly needs one with all its problems. Madras, Bombay at least needs 2. And if you have Mother Teresas to export, some of them are needed in London too. If you hear all these stories in newspapers. Now the question is, when Mother Teresa gives this help to people who are sick, who are thrown out of society, she gives help, and that must be appreciated. But the question we must ask, what is it that creates the victims of the society? What is it? You see, take for example, to compare this, let us say there is a little township, and every year during a certain season the town is seized by an epidemic. Tens of people die each week. And when the epidemic comes, doctors, first aid people go around giving help, giving food. All this is very admirable. But the problem is, this epidemic comes every year. And so when the epidemic comes and people rush help and they, do this, they are honored, the people write long articles about them, wonderful service rendered and so on, but there is somebody who is sitting somewhere and asking this question. Why is it that the epidemic comes every year? What causes this epidemic? Can I find out the root cause of this epidemic? and do something about it so that the epidemics won't strike this township and people won't fall ill. And since people won't fall ill, there will not be even the need and necessity to rush help. What we must ask is, what is it among human beings that allows this tendency to exploit the poor, they exploit the weak? We had this exploitation in the feudal system. We had the exploitation in the capitalist system. We have this exploitation in the socialist system. So the systems change, the tendency to exploit doesn't change. Why do you think Russia saw the rise and the fall of communism? Before communism came, people used to say Russian feudalism was the worst. In other place there is a story, a letter written by the son of a British lord. He went on a vacation to Russia. This is around 1900. And from Russia he writes a letter to his father. He says, "Father, we also have our rich people and our poor people. But the difference between rich people and poor people in Russia is unimaginable. Rich people own lands not in acres but in hundreds of miles. If you are a zamindar, you own hundreds of miles. So these people had the best of food from Europe coming there, best of clothes, and the ordinary peasant had to wait outside the supermarket, whatever the equivalent was in those days, for bread he couldn't buy, and people starved in winter, people died of winter, and that was why communism came. And what did communism promise? Communism promised that all this exploitation will be exterminated. There will be equality and there will be life will be very good. 80 years they tried. Whoever raised a voice against communism was sent to Siberia. If you dig up Siberia today, you will find a human skull every square foot of the land. So many people were killed there. This is the price Russia paid. At the end of 80 years, what happened? They found the exploitation that existed during the Tsarist period existed even now. Except that the exploiters and the exploited had changed positions. Now the party functionaries had heated pools, heated clubs, they had caviar from France, they had wool from somewhere else, they had the best of drinks. Ordinary people stood outside supermarkets queuing up for bread, queuing up for cheese, queuing up for meat, and ultimately after 100 people were served, the stocks are exhausted. Exploitation didn't change. So Mother Teresa's become useful because human beings have a tendency to exploit the poor man. Take for example women. Women are used, and when they serve no more purpose, we throw them outside the home, outside the society, and Mother Teresa goes and takes care of them. The question therefore is, instead of deifying Mother Teresa's, shouldn't we ask this question, what is it about human consciousness that allows this exploitation and has allowed this exploitation age after age, age after age, age after age? Shouldn't we correct that? This is the question Aurobindo is asking. When the calamity takes place, true, some people rush, go with help, and they have to be, their work has to be appreciated. But the basic question to be asked is, why is it such calamities take place age after age, age after age? So he comes to the conclusion. This is because mind, however powerful an instrument it may be in certain respects, is a very weak instrument. It is weak and its weakness is reflected in the weakness of the human consciousness. Many scientists have talked about it. You know, the very, very simple way of putting it is this. In 6th century BC, which is about 2500 years ago, modern science began in a very, very humble way in the Greek city-states. Archimedes and all these people started the beginnings of modern science. In these 2500 years, from 6th century BC to the 20th century is about 2500 years. The progress of science has been dazzling. We have now gone to the moon. We are now thinking of building a space station. So next time, if instead of coming to Wales for my holiday, I will go to the moon station, if that's possible. Space station, because we have sufficiently spoiled this Earth, so the moon station is there. That is the tremendous advancement we have made. Something goes wrong, equipment left on the moon, I can go to my laboratory and correct it from here. The correction reaches the equipment on the moon. That's the tremendous advancement science has made. But at the same time, please remember, 6th century BC was the time when Gautama the Buddha, Confucius walked this earth. And they were examples of great moral excellence. If at that point our moral excellence was at that level, in 2500 years, if there was a similar growth in mind, has anything changed? Nothing has changed. In one aspect of man, nothing has changed. When Encyclopedia Britannica was being written, revised at the beginning of the century, they came upon a word torture. And they said, torture, we don't need it. This was only known to medieval days. In medieval days, they used to apply torture. So they almost were going to leave out the word torture with a small little note, outdated notion. This torture is not applied now. But during the Second World War, torture was raised to a fine art. And nowhere in human history man has applied torture the kind that we applied during the Second World War. Where is the progress? This is the question many people are asking. Why is it that in one aspect of human life there is such tremendous advancement like science, whereas when it refers to man's moral affectability, moral qualities, there is hardly any change? What has happened? Well, scientists have looked at this problem, and some years ago in New York, in Chicago, there was a team of psychologists who tried to answer this question in the following way. He said there is a reason for this. And when you say psychologists say this, we all sit tight and listen to very great reverences. There must be great truth in what they are saying. And they said this is because, I am not making up a story. Okay, this is based on facts. This is called the, Papez-MacLean theory. They said the human brain is in three parts. And the neocortex, the topmost part of the human brain, is what deals with mathematics, science, computers, etc. That is its function, that's its job. And neocortex is the last part of the brain to evolve. So neocortex gives us Einsteins, gives us Bill Gateses, gives us all these intelligent people who solve our problems. Then there are two other parts beneath it. The middle part controls our vital needs and propensities, desire, ambition, etc. All these are controlled by the middle part of the brain. Then there is a bottom part of the brain that controls our physical needs, physical greeds, our lust, our jealousy. All these things are controlled by that part. Now the discovery or the theory proposed by the psychologists was that the bottommost part and the middle part of the brain, by some mistake in nature, have come unevolved. In other words, our bottommost part of the brain we share with the crocodile. What the brain was at that time, for some reason, it has come to us unevolved. The middle part of the brain we share with the horse. The topmost part of the brain we share with Einstein. So when you put your head on a pillow at night, there is a crocodile, there is a horse, and there is Einstein, three brains lying side by side. Now what happens? When your boss says, look, there is an emergency, there is this problem with computers, can you solve it? You go to the office, sit there, and the Einstein part of the brain gets very busy, and before the day is over, the solution has been found. Wonderful. You all clap. The work is over, you go home. When you go home, your wife complains. She had a quarrel with neighbor's wife. What part of the brain takes over at that time? The horse takes over. Then there is some other kind of emergency, the crocodile part of the brain takes over. Now these people believed that this is a mistake nature made several million years ago. There is nothing you can do. They were only hoping, like Aspro, scientists will discover, manufacture some tablet which will bring more or less some harmony. Whenever you feel very agitated, you pop a tablet and the brain will be integrated. The point I am trying to make is that this is the human dilemma. And this is all, recently I wrote an article on this, comparing this with what Aurobindo had said in the human cycle. Aurobindo has said the same thing 80 years ago. He says the problem with man is man's intellect is very sharp, is very well informed, but the main impetus for life doesn't come from the mind. It comes from our vital parts. This is exactly what he's saying. The vital is the horse in us, and the brain is the Einstein in us. So we have Einstein-like brains, but the real motivation for life doesn't come from Einstein, it comes from the horse. And Aurobindo was saying, man's problem basically is to lift the locus of this motivation from the vital to the higher level. And this is something the mind can never do. A greater power than mind alone can do it. And this greater power, Aurobindo discovered it. He called it the supermind. And he found that there are traces of it, reference to it in the Vedas. Then all our Indian Pandits stood up and said, how do you know that there is something? Our Acharyas didn't say it, Madhvacharya didn't say it, Ramanujacharya didn't say it, Shankaracharya didn't say it, this man didn't say it, that man didn't say this. And so, you must either be dreaming. Many of my friends tell me, one thing we grant about Aurobindo. What is it? Nobody had greater dreams for man than Aurobindo. But what he has said will never come true. But if you ask Aurobindo, you know what he says? The descent of the supermind is inevitable, he says. Even if the whole world were to tell me that this is a madman's pursuit, I won't give it up. I have seen it, I have felt it, it is going to come, no matter whether you cooperate with it or you fight it. It is going to come. And this is going to make all the deficiency in man disappear gradually. What is the basic problem we have? The basic problem we have is the mind can see differences, mind can't see harmony. I very often tell my friends, I live in Andhra Pradesh, although I don't belong there. I said in Andhra Pradesh, when three Telugus meet, they form 4 political parties. This is not just Telugus, all Indians are like that. When 3 Indians meet, for 4 political parties are. This is the mental. Mind is like this. If two people are brought together, it won't say what are the similarities between these two people. Mind will concentrate in what ways are they different. So we have groups according to shape of the nose, according to the skin of the color of the skin, according to lips. Anything you give it, it will try to separate what is given, and that is why harmony, unity is not possible at the level of the mind. And if unity is not possible, all the power that mind has given can only be used to destroy what man has built. And that is why Sri Aurobindo is saying that a greater power has to come. Now, where is this greater power? How do you bring this power? And Sri Aurobindo undertakes an exploration of the various worlds of consciousness to see whether this power is somewhere in the worlds of consciousness which are already manifested here. Sri Aurobindo talks about in Life Divine seven levels of the world. The lower levels are matter, life, and mind. Then he talks about the supramental, and then there are Sat, Chit, and Ananda. There are three other worlds. So there are seven levels. Now he undertakes an exploration of the physical world. Then there is what is called subtle physical. Then there are various vital worlds. And beyond that there are various mental worlds. And he goes into each one of these worlds, examines these worlds with great care to see whether the power that we now need to help us go beyond the mind exists in any one of these levels, and finds it doesn't exist in any one of those levels. And Sri Aurobindo's exploration of these various levels is the subject matter of Book 2. Book 2 consists of 15 cantos. In all the 15 cantos that are described here, each is a description of another world. The subtle physical world, vital, there are many vital worlds. Then he goes into the world of evil and darkness. All these descriptions are there. Now this is the most difficult part of Savitri. This is generally not much talked about, not much written about, because only Sri Aurobindo would know what these worlds are. We've never been there. But if you want to find out, many people ask, what was Sri Aurobindo doing for 40 years in Pondicherry? This was what he was trying to do. Is there a secret? Is there a creative principle which I can bring down and establish on earth so that, like electricity, it becomes accessible to the whole of humankind and not a freak siddhi like the Tansen siddhi, which is a freak, only one man can do it. I don't think any other musicians have ever achieved that siddhi. It's a freak siddhi. He didn't want a freak siddhi. He wanted a siddhi which we can all have access to, which the whole of mankind can use. And therefore, it took 40 years, first of all, to explore the various levels of the mind, then to locate this, what is called the supramental consciousness, and then to bring it down. And the ultimate, when Sri Aurobindo gave up his body in 1950, it was, if you really understand it, try to see it what it is, it was a greater act of sacrifice than the act represented by crucifixion of Christ. The crucifixion of Christ in the world's history is a very great event. Christ, by going on the cross, showed us the meaning of love. See, when you are crucified, when nails are struck in your hands and your arms, to be there bleeding, and then say, still pray to the Lord, "O Lord, forgive them, they know not what they are doing." Only God can say this, human beings can't say this. So that's why we regard Christ's crucifixion as a great act of sacrifice. Sri Aurobindo's own personal physical death, the world will not know this because the world doesn't believe in the supramental. You see, when the Ganga was coming down in the Puranas, they say, Bhagirath said Ganga is willing to come down, but who can receive the force of Ganga? He went to Shiva. He said, all right, let her descend into my head. That was the force. And so the supramental force was ready to come down. How shall it come down? Who will receive it? Sri Aurobindo knew that the transformation needed, the physical transformation needed, had not taken place. I'll give you a small example. A tree is living matter. A tree, as I told you the first day, is capable of drawing sustenance through its roots, carrying this sustenance up the trunk, spreading it along the branches. Then it reaches the the leaves and flowers. A stone can't do this. Although you put a stone into the ground, give it manure, give it water, a stone won't sprout. Why? Because even to carry all these things, the cells, the physical matter has to be of a subtler kind. So the tree's body is capable of conveying vital forces, but not all kinds of vital forces, very limited kinds of vital forces. And the bark of a tree, its texture is different from the texture of a stone. It is matter, no doubt, but it's a matter which has been refined so that it can receive, it can convey various kinds of energies. Similarly, from the tree, if you go to an animal, you will find the animal's body is also made of matter, but it is a subtler kind of matter. A subtler kind of matter that can carry, that can convey, that can transport more complex forms of energies. In us, the body is more refined. That is why this is called grey matter. What is called brain, it is still matter, but it's a different kind of matter. It is such a refined kind of matter that it is more complex than a computer. Now suppose a greater force comes, the body has to be ready to receive it. Otherwise the body will crack. There is a story of a Tamil saint called Ramalingam, and he also had an idea that there is a great force to come, and his followers believe he didn't live, he lived only about 100 years before Sri Aurobindo, not very far from Pondicherry either. And one day he told his disciples, I am going to go into my puja room, big hall had been built, don't disturb me until tomorrow morning. So he went into the puja room, all his disciples were sitting outside the puja room expecting to come back after achieving a great siddhi. 24 hours he didn't come out. Finally they opened the door and found that there was only some ashes, like the burnt out ashes of an agarbatti. Now it is surmised that he pulled this force that was ready, but the body was not ready, and so the body burnt like camphor. So the body has to have the power to receive the new force. Sri Aurobindo knew that his body didn't have the power, but somebody to, his main concern was to accelerate the whole process. How to make it as fast as possible. He said, I will give up my body. And the day he gave up his body is the day when the force descended, and since he had offered his body and he knew his body was not ready, that resulted in Sri Aurobindo's death. So Sri Aurobindo's death is in one sense a great act of sacrifice. He did this. And after that, the mother started the yoga of the transformation of the cells. She carried on for nearly 23 years. A story she didn't reveal to anybody except to Satprem. Satprem recorded everything that the mother has said. Finally, all this text has come out as agenda. So this is another story. So what Sri Aurobindo knew this, Sri Aurobindo had told the mother, if it comes to giving up the body, I will go first. Because he said, your body has a greater power to transform itself than my body. He had seen this, and he gave his body. The point I am trying to make is very often people ask this question, for 40 long years, what did Sri Aurobindo do? This is what he did. Locating exactly where this new power was, studying all its facets, finding out ways of reaching it, preparing to bring it down, and when he knew that a new body will have to be created before it can come down, he said, I don't have that kind of a time. It doesn't matter if it takes away my body. And it came down, and he lay flat, and it came out as his death. And as you all know, although Sri Aurobindo's doctor certified that his body had no life on December the 5th, until December the 9th, the body remained fresh in Pondicherry in that kind of a heat. Human bodies begin to disintegrate within less than 24 hours. People saw golden light, some people saw golden light surrounding his body, and some people were not able to see it, then went to say, Sir, mother, many people are saying they see this light. I don't see this light. Mother just touched some of these people, and they were surprised to see that light surrounding Sri Aurobindo's body. And the mother has said that minute Sri Aurobindo gave up his life, all this force came into my body, almost making a hissing sound, as if force is coming with great force. Now this is what Sri Aurobindo did. And all this, all the secret of this is talked about in Ashwapati's Yoga. The 3 books of Ashwapati's Yoga we are now going to talk about is this journey. And if somebody doesn't have access to this, if somebody doesn't understand this, he doesn't understand Sri Aurobindo's Yoga. All that he can see from his life is that Sri Aurobindo was fond of Rasagulla. He can see, that Sri Aurobindo also at one time was smoking cheroot, cigar. It seems he was smoking cigar. And what is it that you can imitate? Whatever Sri Aurobindo does. Yoga I can't. I can imitate cigar smoking. So all the chota-mota bhaktas in the ashram started cigar smoking. So the mother once mentioned this to Sri Aurobindo. And the minute she said this, that was the last. He had no more any cigars. You see. So outer life, external life that you and I talk about, we can only know these details. Who would know his godlike life, the great sacrifice he did? You see, avatars come. Avatars, generally in the Indian imagination, avatars are people who perform miracles. If you don't perform miracles, you are no good, you are no avatar. I always give this example. Suppose I will give you the example of Christ. Imagine another scenario. The Roman general Pilate, his soldiers have whips in their hands, and they are driving this, Christ, and the companions of Christ were thieves and murderers and so on. He was crucified in the company of this distinguished company. They were all asked to carry their own crosses. They are going up, and suddenly they find Christ is missing. What happened to Christ? He was here. And red alert is given, and so everybody looked, Christ is missing, Christ is gone, Christ is gone. Where is he gone? Anyway, finally they all reach the top of the hill. Christ is still missing, and they're wondering what happened to Christ. Suddenly you see a light from the next hillock, and there you look at it, Christ standing there and waving his hands. Suppose he had done this, would he be an avatar? He would be a magician. He would be a Houdini. He won't be Christ. Avatar is one who lives human life in such a way that he shows the way to godhood. And Christ showed this in the midst of excruciating pain. He had this kind of love for the whole of humanity. Magic is not the purpose of an avatar. Our human mind weaves all kinds of legends about a person we admire a great deal. Krishna has 16,000 wives. I was telling Dhirubai the other day, I had a Christian friend whose life's great passion was to convert me. He said, this man seems to be quite lost, so he will convert me. Of course, we became good friends. His problem was, being Christian, this immaculate conception was his problem. He says, I was almost on the verge of accepting Ramakrishna Paramhamsa as an avatar. But then I said, he was not born out of immaculate conception like Christ. Ramakrishna Paramhamsa is a product of sin. This was his problem. And this is his problem anyway. So one day he told me, this may be of some interest, the time is getting on. He said, I always believed this story of Krishna having 16,000 wives and so many admirers. I thought it was just bunkam. There was no truth in it. There must be some exaggerated poet's fancy. But he said, he came to England once, long time ago, on a British Council scholarship. And he says, the year I came here, one of the Beatles got married. I don't know which one it was. And he said, the day he got married, as this Beatle and his wife are coming out of the church, there are literally thousands of women surrounding the church, and they were all sobbing and crying. Thousands of women, who all probably thought that they would marry him, or at least they could live in this hope. Today the hope is crashed. So, unless we have these things, we don't regard anybody as an avatar. Avatar for us is somebody who is a magician. But the Indian concept of avatar is not magic. Avatar comes down to show us a way how to grow from her manhood to godhood. His life is that story. And how Sri Aurobindo did it, what he did, is all found in Savitri. He always said, my life was not lived on the surface for people to see and write about. My life was lived below the surface. And this is what he describes himself. So in one sense, the most important part of Savitri is the first three books. Because the first three books talk to you about Sri Aurobindo's own life. Now all this, whatever I said today, is a background to what I am going to take up tomorrow, where Ashwapati, in his exploration of the worlds, exhausts all the worlds and comes to a point which is described in our all traditional yogas as the highest point a yogi can reach. This is the point of nirvana. And Ashwapati comes there and is about to be merged into this nirvana. Something in him asks not to choose that path. That's a very dramatic part of this. There is no time to even to talk about it, start this, so we'll take it up tomorrow. The beginning of Book 3 in Savitri. Book 2, I didn't want to go into for fear that we may be trapped in it for the next 10-11 days. In brief, as I said, the Book 2 is Ashwapati's exploration of the various worlds of consciousness, from the subtle physical to the highest mental world. He goes to these worlds, finds what these worlds contain, but finds they do not contain the essential secret he wants to find out, the secret of the supermind. And therefore, he decides to go beyond the mind to the transcendental Supreme Mother, Adya Shakti. I will have to say something about it. Tomorrow I will do it in Sri Aurobindo's Yoga. The beginning is Vedantic, the end is Tantric. He brings together Vedanta and Tantra together, and this is why the mother plays such an important role in Sri Aurobindo's Yoga. I will talk about it tomorrow. I leave 10 minutes before time because yesterday and the day before I took the day before half an hour more, yesterday 15 minutes more. So today I think we'll stop here.
3 levels.
Yeah, 3, yeah. It's on page 778. If yours is a new edition, if not, you will have to check up. This must be an old edition, this is a new edition. So it may be, 600 something odd. I will tell you later.